Alright, today I'm going to go through and make this Phantom of the Opera mask out of some EVA foam with some elastic. And I'm doing this by request from HighRocker224. And as always, if you guys have a request, post them. I will get to them as soon as I can. I've had recent requests for a Spawn cape. I will do that, but it's not going to be until the bodysuit and some other things are done. And the armor as well, I need all that stuff done so I can see how large or small I need the cape to be. And another thing is, I also need to do Bumblebee stingers, Bumblebee from Teen Titans. I am going to do that. I'm just really super broke right now. My work was shut down for a week with no pay. So this month, and it is Halloween, I have a lot of stuff going on. So whenever I get the money for the LEDs, I will make the stingers. Alright, now let's go ahead and jump into this. Okay, so to get this mask started, I've taken the head here and I've covered it with some Elmer's glue and then just some cling wrap. And now that that's done, I'm going to start taking some pieces of duct tape and making sure the duct tape is nice and tight and smooth over the head. And paying particular attention to the areas like the eyes and brow here. And this is what is going to form the basic generic piece, so to speak, of my actual mask. Now, I'm only going to do a half mask and probably technically don't need to tape up all these areas, but I'm going to anyways, just because that way I have a nice even perspective to look at. And get some more duct tape. Doesn't really matter which way you put the duct tape on. You just need to, as much as possible, retain the shape of the mannequin head underneath. Now, you guys can just like skip this whole step essentially, because I am going to be taking photos of the pattern like I try to do with as many of my projects as possible. So you guys can just go to the Facebook page and print it out if you don't feel like making your own pattern. But this is how I do it. There's nothing special or fancy about this. I didn't come up with this. This has been done I don't know how many times, but I don't know how many people. The first time I saw it was using a sock. And you put the sock on your leg and then you wrap the sock in duct tape once it's on your leg, and then that makes your pattern for your actual spats. And these are spats like old school spats that my girlfriend and I were making for a Halloween costume. And the second time I saw it was on either Sean Zing or Raw Customs channel. And that was years later, whenever I started actually making cosplay stuff instead of just helping my girlfriend with her sewing. Okay, so there is the full finished face. This side I didn't do so great because I'm actually not going to have a mask on that side. But this side is where I'm actually going to draw the mask. I'm just going to draw the shape I want with a Sharpie. Alright, here is my finalized pattern. I just drew it out on here, the hole for the eye. These other lines, the side line represents where I'm going to put a cut in it. It's going to be two pieces. And I might leave it one piece and just have a slit up the side. But either way, all these other lines here are cut lines. And those cut lines are going to help the pattern lay flat so I can draw it out in the EVA foam. Like I say, you can just download the actual pattern or off of my Facebook page. Okay, so oddly enough, in order to get this to lay flat, I didn't actually end up cutting this whole side piece off like I thought. What I did have to cut off, though, was this nose piece here. So that'll be glued back on here. Next, I'm going to take this and trace it out on the foam. Alright, I glued all the little slits back together first on this piece, and then I glued the center of the nose together, and then I glued the nose to the mask. And I glued this with a little bit of an inward bend. I'm going to, of course, heat this with a heat gun, but even right now, you know, without heating or sanding or doing anything to it, it has a pretty good shape. I did, at least I feel, a pretty good job of this pattern, getting it to come out pretty good so far. But like, I need to apply some heat to the back of it and the front, and have this part, for example, right here go in. I need to have the nose curve. There's just a lot of little things I need to adjust with the heat gun before I move on to sanding. But I'm going to go through bit by bit and piece by piece and show you one at a time what it looks like after I heat it. Alright, so going to town here with the heat gun. I'm going to give you a quick breakdown of what I do. Now, first area I worked on was the nose. And I started by heating the front and squeezing it this way. And a couple points, the contact cement did want to come undone, so I did end up having to just kind of finagle around and constantly stick it back together and shape it. And then I heated the back and flexed it some more to give it some nice shape. Next, I heated the eye areas so that the eye areas now curve in. And after that, pushed out the cheekbone, heated this, and pushed it in. You can still see my fingerprints from my thumb on here a little bit. I need to heat that and take that out. And put this light crease here, going from the corner of the brow into this. And just kind of smooth this area out. I also took and trimmed this round and trimmed this a little bit round. Both these are going to get sanded with a Dremel. And lastly, I put in the brows. The brows are really important. When you look at it sideways here, you can see the slope of the forehead going out into the brow, which then curves down into the ocular area. And especially for like the Phantom of the Opera mask, you want to have that definition. So I'm pretty happy with this. And now I'm going to move on to sanding. And to sand this, I'm going to use my Dremel. Okay, now that I have some nice brow definition and everything heated into here, I got the cheekbone accentuated and all that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start sanding and shaping this the rest of the way. May trim a little more here off the side of the nose, but I'm not sure. And part of what I'm going to sand is these seams to make sure they're nice and even. And it's always good to get them nice and even, because then I don't have to spend as much time siliconing and trying to cover up any seams. So yeah, I'm going to hop onto that next. Alright, so for the sanding on this, you can already kind of see here, these ones I've already sanded. And there's just such a world of difference between them. Like this one that I didn't. You can't see it so much on camera, but see, you can kind of hear it. Where the seam is, whenever I go across it. But here, you know, that's the difference. It doesn't seem like much, but man, it really is a lot. And I use a Dremel because I have one, and I only have one because it was a Christmas present. I don't have a lot of money. But before I had this Dremel, I was hand sanding everything. So it's totally possible. You don't need power tools, or, well, this is a rotary tool, but still, form of power tool. You don't need that stuff. You can do it all by hand. But this does make it a whole lot quicker. And yeah, now you can, just like, oh, still got a little bit of an edge there. Alright, there we go. Okay, now that's all nice and smoothed out. Still need to sand all these other edges and crevices and places that it's been glued together. I'm going to do that now. And then once all that's done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on sanding and smoothing out these edges and rounding out some of these areas that I just kind of hastily trimmed off. Okay, and yeah. Once it's all sanded, we'll move on to siliconing. Okay, for the siliconing phase of this, you're going to need two things. Technically 3 because you need something to wipe your finger off on periodically, but 2 main things you need are just some regular old tap water and some silicone. Now it comes in a tube. This is the actual tube that it comes in. It's an all-purpose acrylic latex caulk plus silicone. Now, it's acrylic, so it's water-based, and you can use water to either thin it out or smooth it out, which is what I'm going to do. And I did a couple areas here earlier. I just used to fill in these seams. Okay? And what I do is get a little bit of this on my finger. And I will apply it to and work it down into the seam itself. Get a little bit more of this. Okay, and once I get that on there, what I'll do is I try to get off all the excess, and then I just get my finger wet, and I will use my wet finger to just smooth out everything. Now this of course is acrylic, so it is water based, and as it dries and evaporates it does tend to shrink, so you may need to do a few layers, and my advice is to be patient, and if you have to do 2 or 3 rather thin layers, I would do that, because once you get a thick layer it's really hard to sand down. You have to do it by hand. If you do a Dremel, my experience is it'll tear the silicone right off of whatever project is you're working on, so you don't really want to use a Dremel, but you have to hand sand it, and like I say, that really is slow and tedious. You have to use a fine grit sandpaper. So I'm going to go through and apply this silicone and smooth it out to all these seams all over the mask, and then I'll come back and show you what I'm going to do from there. Alright, so at this point I've, as you can see up here, already done all the seams, and that's with 2 layers on here, and I've started to apply more silicone overall. Part of this is just give a little definition and some line work in here with my fingers. This here I'm waiting to set semi-tacky, and I'm actually going to smooth it out. Now I don't suggest honestly going through and doing all of this siliconing if you've never done it before, and the reason for that is I've worked this a lot to the point that I'm kind of know what I'm doing, but I'm not really 100%. Like, I'm not an artist, you know, in that sense of like sculpting and using things. I'm still learning, but I've worked this a lot in the last couple years. And the safest thing I would suggest if you've never used this stuff before is just do the seams. And honestly, if you sand it good enough, you don't even really need to do the seams. I just enjoy this part of it, so I'm doing it. Right now I am moving on doing the forehead. Much like in the previous shot, you saw there's a lot of lines and things in here, but as you can see I've gone through and cleared that up. Now this up here in the phase of drying and setting somewhat, I'm going to go back through and smooth it out again with some water once this evaporates some. And once I'm fully done with all the siliconing I feel like I need and want to do to this, I'm going to start sealing it next. Okay, so in the thickest areas I'd say I did about 4 layers of silicone, and you'll notice here that it is a lot smoother. And the reason for that is I took this 320 grit fine sanding block, and you can see all the white on it, buffed out the major areas, and then I took some 600 grit and sanded that as smooth as possible. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a paintbrush and some Mod Podge, and I'm going to go ahead and do one thin even coat and let that dry. I'm going to put it on as quickly and as evenly as possible so I don't get a whole bunch of lines and brush strokes, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to seal these edges after the top part is dried. Alright, so I put some Testors Opaque White that I mixed with some Mod Podge, and I put that in my airbrush. You can always just paint this with whatever. but this is what I have, so this is what I'm doing. Alright, so I'm just going to continue along like that until I get the whole entire thing nice and coated. I'm probably going to give it at least 2-3 coats. And if I see any nicks or dings or any areas of it that I really don't feel comfortable with, I'll fix them as well along this whole process. Alright, so I've done the painting on both sides. I did about 4 or 5 coats on the top here, and I only did a couple just on the back side and like the edges of the eyes and stuff, just enough to get it white, so that, you know, even when it's on, you're not going to see any red. And the last thing I'm going to do, before I can try this on, of course, is I'm going to put some elastic on this with some Velcro. And the elastic is part of the reason why I had the brow come down so far on this side. If there's a way you could find to attach your mask, which I know there is, without using elastic, you could just have it, you know, stuck to your face. But having the elastic on the ones that came up higher, it cut through the hairline really strangely, and I didn't really like that. So it's still going to be somewhat of an angle, but it's not going to be as extreme, and it's going to be attached here and over here. So yeah, somewhat of an angle, but not too extreme. So I'm going to measure out just exactly how much I need, cut it, and I'm just going to use some hot glue to attach it. Right, so yeah, here it is. I feel like it fits pretty well. I like the way it looks on my face. I like the way the brow line and everything came out. I think it looks all around pretty good. Alright, so yeah, that's pretty much it. Just hot glued this on, and yeah, you can see in the previous clip that it fits me pretty good, and I like the way, like I say, the brow and everything came out on it. I think it looks pretty sweet. I like the subtle texture on it, and yeah, I'm pretty stoked on this. Now, a few things that I did differently from a lot of the masks I see, like I mentioned, was the brow. I didn't want it going way up here and having an odd, too much of an odd hair disrupting line here. Another thing is, a lot of them cover the nose, and I considered it, but I didn't. And the reason why, well, 2 reasons actually. One, it's really hard to breathe, and if you're wearing this for any extended period of time, it's going to drive you crazy. And you could always take it off and on, but it's going to mess up your hair. And the next thing is, I actually wanted the bottom of my nose sticking out. My fiance is pretty good with makeup, and if I would decide to wear this, it'd probably be to a Halloween party, and I would just wear, of course, a suit, and I have a Sith cloak I could probably just throw over as well. It would look pretty cool. And I would want her to do some makeup on my nose itself and like my upper lip, so you could see some of that just kind of leaking out from underneath the mask. I think that would look really cool. But yeah, that's pretty much it. And as always, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and it gave you some ideas and inspired you. And if you did enjoy this video, please leave a like. And as always, thanks for watching.